Hey guys, welcome back. Demo RPG episode 6, and we are going to code up this next part in C++. So it's intended either for, I guess, your entertainment or your learning, or if you're following along, then awesome. Any of those are great. Now, I will say just right off the bat here, there's an outtake of this episode, because I was going to do what I'm about to do in a different way, but I think it's going to be more complicated that way. So I'm scrapping that episode and we're going to go a different direction. But if you want to see it, if you're at the supporter level here on the channel, you can join or on Patreon. It's $3 a month. It helps support the channel and me making these productions and keeping going. I'll post that episode over there. And so just throwing that out there. And I always appreciate everybody's support, even if it's just watching, hitting the like button, whatever it is. All right, so today we are going to introduce some level trees. Now we're just going to keep it really simple because there's a lot I want to do with this, but it gets really complicated really fast and requires a lot of extra code because originally I was thinking I wanted to do 3 different kinds of abilities. Triggered abilities, where something happens and your ability kind of automatically happens, and passive abilities, something that just adds to a stat or something, and then that's it. It never really does anything again other than just permanently buff a stat. And then I was also thinking there would be active abilities, something you can do during battle where you can choose an action. These would be like spells, special attacks, things like that. I'm going to scrap the whole triggered thing because that just gets too complicated, and we haven't even built the battle system yet, although I'd really like to. I just feel like there's no real point until we at least have some abilities, so we'll get to that real soon. Alright, so we're going to start upgrading these character classes and start adding some level trees. And depending on how much time we have left after we build a few, we might work on a few other things. Alright, well the first thing that has to go is this macro. This is a very cool thing you can do and all, but it's not really going to work in the long run because our classes are going to have level trees. And I was thinking of doing this in one way where this may have worked okay, but we're changing that. So this is probably going to be, this whole macro thing is probably going to be something we do later for monsters, as we can make a bunch of different types of monsters really quickly. But for these specific 4 main character classes, they're all going to start to differentiate quite a bit. So it makes sense for them to have their own thing going on. And that's really all we're going to do on this episode. So actually, I'm just going to copy. There's a history of this on GitHub, so there's no need to keep comments. That's one of the things about using version control. You know, sometimes you see people keep their own code and just comment it out because they think, oh, I might need to reference it or use it later. Well, with version control, you can just go on to GitHub or whatever it is you're using and just look at the history, and it's that easy. So no need to convolute your code with a bunch of extra stuff like this. But for just a second, we will. So we're just going to delete all of this, and we can get rid of these things that say eat a new line, and there we go. And now we actually need to put the real numbers back in here. Let's build out Cleric. 14351 was what we decided on those. Class name, Cleric. We'll still macro out some of this stuff, but we're going to change how these work a little bit, just so it actually is functional. Delete that one. Leave those there for a second. And alright, so we have level up. It levels up our stats, but also in our level up, this is where we want to do stuff with our class trees. So we're going to have to change the way this macro works. I think we're just going to take this here, this whole first line of the level up, and we'll put it just like that. Well, the main reason is I want this bracket to be here. Like this level up override is going to stay the same, but it's going to look confusing if part of this is in the bracket and part of it is not, because we just want it to be this little block of these 3 lines of code, and that will be fine. Alright, I think we can get rid of this last one there. There we go. So since we have it eating a new line right here on this macro, it's going to basically go, it's going to take this, eat the new line there, so it's going to, and then it's going to take this one and this one, and the macro is going to be those 3 lines of code and end right there. So we could still go level up and do this thing right here, and that will be fine. And down here, what we want to start doing is building our class, and also a few other things here. The Cleric is going to use another point well. Everyone's got HP, so we're able to put that in the player character delegate. These are things that all of them have in common. So that's okay. And also, I've decided there's really no reason right now for us to use memory and make the HP unique. It sort of just adds a little bit of convolution to the whole thing because we're not going to be using any of the features of the unique pointer, although they are cool and have their effects. This is just too simple of a thing to really be worrying about it right now. Now, I might explain later why I intended that, but for right now, let's just go HP 1. I think that's how we wanted it, right? And we need to change this down here. Just take off the whole unique pointer thing. You know, it's kind of okay to be unique pointer. It's just the potential of the null reference and the checking of the error code is sometimes a little overdone. So we're just trying to remove any redundancy we can to simplify things. This is going to be point type. Is that right? No, it's well type. Okay, let's make sure we cast these. It's not going to hurt anything too badly if we don't, because it's going to implicitly do it, but we might as well. Okay, that looks good on the delegate class. I'm going to go ahead and just collapse it so it gets out of the way. I got our nice little macros there. And we need to add this MP pool to the Cleric, so let's just do that below this constructor here. We'll just go point well MP. Now there's something else we could do. We could inherit another thing like caster here or something like that. To say that the Cleric is a caster, and that could automatically populate things like this point well and maybe a few other things to manage the MP. We're not going to do that yet, but it's possible we might move to that if we find ourselves retyping a lot of this stuff. So for now, we're just going to do it like this. Point well, MP, and in this constructor, we're going to change this constructor a little bit as well. Let's see, mainly we want to manually type some more of this stuff. We want it to kind of be like how the level up is for now, and just the internal block of code. I don't like having these brackets in it because then it sort of makes it confusing about what's really going on there. That's just a personal preference. Obviously, it works either way. So I'm going to put a bracket there and a bracket there. And I guess we're going to actually need to take this here too and put it here. I think that's going to be fine. Where are we at? Okay, we need to get rid of this bracket here and this last new line. So now this PC construct is just going to be these 3 lines of code. And that's really just so we don't have to repeat it all the time. Okay. And it'll look something like that. And then we can add Cleric specific stuff here, level up Cleric specific stuff here, and that should be okay. Now, first of all, we do need to decide the base MP. So that is something we could maybe add to the caster type specifically. But it might change based on the different classes. So let's just make it, for now, static const, another well type called base MP. And we just need to decide what it starts at for this character. I guess I'll put use on that. Make sure they're unsigned. So then we can just we can do a very similar thing that we were doing with the HP. We can use this set max and increase current just like we were doing on that. And we want to do those on construct, just like this here. So we'll do that, except of course these are MP. And we're going to use the base on that. And we don't need those. And, oh, we don't need this pointer thing because they're no longer unique pointers, so it's just a dot. And it's going to be the same in our macros up here too. So we want to make sure we correct that everywhere. since we got rid of those unique pointers. Otherwise, we're going to have some compiler errors. And maybe we'll just do a quick search for HP and see if there's anywhere else we set that. Looks good. I don't think so. Oh, wait, we got some here. So actually, we can just search. You just select HP and the arrow. Hit Control H. It might be different on your editor. We can just change that to HP dot and do a replace all, and that should take care of all of them. All right, cool. Okay, just an oddity I should mention here, and this is a Visual Studio thing. Anytime you make these macros, apparently the next line below it, it auto tabs over. Even if I hit my correct syntax, it still puts it, it still tabs it over. And I was trying to figure out how to change that. It's going to do the same thing for our level up. Even if you tab down another, or enter down another line, it still wants to tab the thing below your macro, even though there's no reason it should. The macro, you know, it's just 3 lines of code. There's no reason to be indenting after all of that on the next line. It really makes no sense. It's like it thinks it's a new function or something. So I did some digging around online to try to figure out how to set this. And I found a really old answer from someone on the Microsoft team that basically said, it's not a bug. That's how it was intended. They didn't really specify why, but that answer had a lot of downvotes, so nobody really liked that answer. I mean, I can delete it and it looks fine, but anytime I hit the auto format button, it's just going to put it right back. So just an annoyance we're going to have to deal with if we're using this editor and we're using macros. If you could fix that Visual Studio, that'd be great. It's not a good feature. It's a feature that doesn't even make any sense. But it's a minor thing overall. It's not going to ultimately hurt our code any. It's just going to look awkward. All right, let's move on. So we want to do the same thing with the level up for this max HP stuff. And it's just going to be a set max and increase max on those. Just to make sure that it actually increases. And we'll do the same. We'll use the max, or we'll just increase it by half the base. Make sure these are base MP on these. Otherwise, it's not going to scale correctly. We don't want to scale with health. All right, so that looks good. I'm going to hit the format button and just see what it does. And yep, it's definitely tabbing those over. It's definitely a coding sin, but we're just going to deal with it and move on for now. And yeah, it's going to have to do it. Okay, and next thing we want to do here is just integrate some level trees and some abilities. Now, I think the passive ones we can, for now, we're just going to apply whatever the passive buff is, if it's a little bit of buff to strength or something. Now, I've got a few level trees worked out that I kind of just came off the top of my noggin here. I've got up to level 5 for all the classes of what they gain. And some of them might work, some of them we might have to change a little bit. But we're just going to keep this really simple. And, well, the level 1 stuff, we're just going to put in the constructor because you're going to start at level 1 anyway, so it makes sense for that to be in the constructor. And the main thing I have for a cleric getting at level 1 is they're going to get some MP, and they're also going to gain an ability to heal magic spell. So we need to figure out a little system for adding spells and adding active abilities, which I'll work on here in a second and talk all about. All right, so let's build this level tree. Now, we're just going to use some if statements basically, because when you level up, you have a very specific level. You have a current level. And so you get this new current level when you level up, and that's it. It just does one at a time. Now, this is just going to be a really basic way of doing it. So we're just going to say if current level equals whatever it may be. We're skipping 1 because we get all the 1 stuff in the constructor. So this is all we're going to do for now. Is just make a tree of these. Now this is going to get really lengthy in the code, but there's no real problem with it other than that. So current level equals 2. We want to get our next ability. Now hold on. I had a first ability here too. And it is just like a heal spell. We want the cleric to start out at level 1 with some MP and a heal spell to actually use. So we're going to do something like in this constructor. Sorry, I'm kind of skipping around here a little bit. Just want to make sure the level 1's taken care of before we start doing level 2. We'll do something like gain ability and add that ability, but this brings up another point. So how are we going to use these abilities? How are we going to select them and say, hey, my action is this ability, and that sort of thing? And we got to kind of think about the flow of the game. Now in combat, we're going to do turn-based, so we can just assume that using an ability takes your turn, and that should be that. What we don't want to have to do at this stage, since we're keeping this simple, is we don't want to have to program in a bunch of special features. Like, we don't necessarily want to give abilities that say stuff like take an extra turn, take 2 actions, or on your, just stuff that's going to convolute our whole system. That might be for a later date when we start getting more advanced, but we want to keep it simple right now. So let's just make an ability class, and we're going to build that in a header because this is something we're going to probably reuse a lot. So let's make a new item here. A header, we'll just call this ability, and we just need to build up a little ability system here. We could use a struct or a class. We're going to just stick with struct for the moment. We might change it later. But now let's think about this. When you have some abilities, you need to know some things about them. Like, they're going to have a cost, and they're going to have, they might have no cost. That would be fine. And they're going to have a set of things they do, and they're going to have a name. Let's go ahead and get the name in here. That's let's just make that a string so we can make it whatever we want. String. So abilities are going to have a name. They're going to have a cost. Now we need to decide how we're going to do the cost. We could just go something like, we could just make it an unsigned int and call it cost. So we could assume these will cost MP. For now, assume MP if there is a cost. And we could say maybe it's just a free thing that if it doesn't have a cost, it's just free. Or something like that. We might have to make some interesting assumptions here. What I'm kind of thinking is, okay, if it's a spell, it's got an MP cost. You're going to use it every time. Now, if it's a just like an attack or something, maybe it doesn't have a cost, but it has a cooldown, so you can't necessarily use it every time. So the cost would signify the cooldown in that case, or maybe we want both. So let's just put both in here for now. Unsigned int cooldown, and this will be number of rounds that you have to wait, basically, before you can use it again. You have to wait before using it again. So that might be good for the rogue and warrior, and just abilities that they don't have a cost, but it would be just too OP if you could just spam their best ability every single round. So maybe you want that cooldown to balance it. That's all I'm thinking there. So we got a name, a cost, cooldown. Now we need some sort of effect. So how are we going to do this effect? I guess another thing we need here is we need a target. So it's either going to be an enemy or an ally target, or maybe it's going to be a global effect. So there's going to be a couple different ways of doing this. I think for now we're just going to say, well, let's make an enum here. Let's use the power of enum to say it has to be one of these. Enum. We might change this later, and we'll just call this ability target. Ability target, and it could be, let's see. I think we got the class here. Class. And this is basically, an enum is basically a type. So that's all it's really going to be. And we need to assign it some potential values. And it can only be one of these at a time is sort of the point of an enum. So it could target self. It could target enemy. It could target ally. And it could just be global. I guess we could have like an all enemies, all allies type things, but honestly, this is getting too complicated. Let's just stick with enemy or ally. And in that case, there's only 2 things. So we could even go with just a Boolean, because that's going to use less memory. So let's just do that. We'll change this to an enum later, but just so you know it's possible. Targets. So I guess we just need to make this clear. Is ally spell. So if this is false, it'll hit enemies only. If not, then it's going to be for allies who this targets. Yeah, that's good enough. I think I may have constructed in this list here a few abilities that are definitely self-target only. So maybe we actually do want that enum. So, but that's just kind of thinking out loud there. So let's put self back in here. Self, ally, enemy. Good enough. Now you can do just extra special stuff with enums if you don't really know about them. Definitely worth looking up and reading them at this point. But basically, whenever we instantiate this variable that we've created here called ability target, it can only be set to 3 different things: self, ally, or enemy, and these will correlate to basically integers. And the first one always starts at 0 unless you decide it doesn't. But by default, it's just going to be self is going to be 0, ally is going to be 1, enemy is going to be 2, and that's fine with us, 0, 1, 2. So let's just put that variable in here now, ability target, and we'll just call this target. And we do need an effect here, and I think for effect, you know, it could potentially affect health, it could potentially add or remove debuffs. We're not going to add in buffs and debuffs just yet. That'll be something for a later date, because those will need things like durations. For now, I think we're just going to keep it real simple here and just add in an effect. So what does it affect? Well, one thing we could use here is we could use a stat block. Most of these are probably going to affect health or damage. So that doesn't necessarily work the best because we only have these. It could work if we say add the stats from this stat block to that stat block sort of thing, but that's not always going to be the best thing. We'll just go like this: struct ability effect. And in this case, we just want to say what it does, basically. So let's just make a few things here. You know, I think we might actually want integer on this one, potentially, because we could say, well, I guess we have to make some assumptions here. Now, let's stick with all unsigned for now, but we could say if it's targeting an ally and it is a HP effect, it's going to heal. If it's targeting an enemy and it's an HP effect, it's going to take HP away. So we could do something like that. We will probably add more to this later, but I think we'll just stick with that for right now, just HP effects only. I don't think I have a whole lot of other things on here. I did have some things that would involve buffing and debuffing, but we're not going to worry about those for now. We just want to get the gist of this down. And in fact, if there's really only one thing right here, we don't even necessarily need this struct yet, but I think we're going to expand on it later. So, nah, let's just say we'll expand on it later when we need to. Let's just do this. So there we go. We got these fields. That's it. We could give them some default values. We'll call this like unnamed. They don't name it. The cost, we'll start it at 0 for no cost. And we'll cool down. We'll assume everything's just a 1 unless they change it. 1 would mean you could use it every round. And a target, we'll start this out with ability target. What do we even say? I guess we'll just do self. And a lot of times when people make these, they'll have the first one as like none or something like that. We're just not going to do that. We're just going to default it to self if they don't say. And then an HP effect. Self might even be redundant, but it's okay because it kind of overlaps with ally a little bit, but self just implies you can't target your own other allies, only you. HP effect, let's just start it at 1, so it does something. Now, of course, we're going to want to fill this struct out every time we set one of these up, so it might make sense to have a constructor with all this stuff ready to go. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's put a little constructor in here. Ability. And yeah, we'll do it like this. So you can pass in a string for name, unsigned int. Well, this HP effect we know could be stat type. We just don't have that in here yet. So let's just stick with these unsigned ints. It's just a bit of a lengthy name to type over and over, unsigned. And I guess we could also type U and 32T, but then we need to include the C standard thing, which might be in string too. C standard int. A little shorter to type that. And let's be real, we probably don't need 32-bit unsigned integers. That goes to like 2 billion or something, and we're not going to go that high, but it's fine. Cost, and let's rename these a little bit. So this will be name, cost. Now we don't want these to be the same name as these variable names, so let's just do something like capitalize these. That'll be fine. That way we know they're part of the actual one. HP effect, we'll just do it like that. And that way we can use all lowercase here in this constructor. Unit 32T. We'll just call it cooldown CD. I think everyone knows what that is. And we'll go ability target T. We'll just call it T. And then HP effect. Or, well, let's see, this is a unit 32. There's a couple different ways we could design this class now. We could use some of those default values like we had in the other one, which I kind of like the idea of, actually. But any way you do it's probably okay. Yeah, HP effect. I'll just call this HPE. And there we go. And now we can construct these automatically on the fly, like so. Name will be name, cost will be cost, cooldown will be CB, target will be T, and HP effect will be HP. And nothing else needed, so we'll just leave these brackets empty. We can even tag them on there, however you want to do it's fine. But there we go. Now we got a constructor where we can fill everything out with if you want. Now the way this is going to work is if you just default construct it, it's going to have all this stuff. And if you want to specify things in the constructor, you do have to specify all of them. So we could do it, like we did, I think in the previous episode with equals here for all the default values, but either way, it doesn't really matter a whole lot, just whatever you decide. All right, so looks like we have an ability in mind. Let's go back to the player character. Let's go up to the top and include ability now. Include ability.h. And let's start adding these on. So if a player character can have multiple abilities, and all of them are eventually going to have some kind of abilities, we're going to need to store all these some way. So we're going to use a vector for that. Just keep it real simple. Use that vector. Another thing to look up if you're new and don't know about them. But basically, we're just going to put this down here under the player character delegate, since all of them are going to have these eventually. Standard vector of abilities called, well, it's abilities. And we can start filling this out as we go. As they gain them, we can just push them back. Then once we're in combat, we can iterate through these and see which ones are available and off cooldown and display them to the end user. So let's go ahead and do that. So now, since this inherits, they're all going to have that ready to go. And what we can do here is just, well, on construct, let's go ahead and add the heal. So let's go abilities dot. We could use in place back to construct it in place. I actually like that here. Place back. Now in place, as opposed to push back, it'll construct it in place. So sometimes it's a little more efficient. But did I spell this wrong? Oh yeah, I need an I right here. It needs the constructor values. So if we leave it blank, it's just going to construct a blank one with all these defaults. Now we don't want that. We want to give it all the stuff. So I'm going to go off of what I have here. It's called heal. Let's see, I've got more here. Yeah, and we need it actually gives us a little hint here. You can see it's got this constructor stuff. It needs a cost. We're going to say it costs 2. And we're also going to say the cooldown is just 1. Ability target. No, we got to use this specific syntax. Ability target to specify it's that variable. And this is going to be ally in our case. And HP effect. How much is the heal for? Well, we got to decide an amount. And we'd probably want to have these scale off one of their abilities. So that might be something that we actually want to do, to say which one it scales off of, strength and or agility based. So I like that idea. Let's go ahead and add that in here. And so I'm just going to make another enum right now. And we'll call this what we got, ability scaler. Yeah, there we go. And we could say none, or if it doesn't scale off anything. Then we can have strength, and we have agility, and we have int. So it could scale off of any of those, and we'll have to decide how it scales. Maybe we could even add that to the ability too, how much it scales off its particular ability. But basically what we want to do is just add that on in here as well. This will give us just a little more play for the future of, when we level up, our character will actually get stronger based on their stats, because it's going to scale the abilities. So just kind of a cool thing we'll be able to add in the future. And we'll just call this scalar. We probably also need to say how much it scales, but we'll assume none by default on this ability scalar, none. Now, of course, we need to add it to the constructor as well. So we'll just tack that right onto the end here. Ability scalar. We'll just call it S. And we'll tack that onto here. Scalar is going to construct to S. And there we go. So later when we run calculations on these, we can do that. And yeah, we probably should have a scale percent, but we'll just assume, we've been assuming a lot of half. So maybe we'll just assume half on these as well for whatever the scalar is. That's going to be fine. We'll stick with that in our heads for now. And I think we're good there. So we just need to be sure to add this. So this is going to scale off intellect. It's going to have a base of 2. That should be fine. And ability scalar, we're going to say int. So there we go. That'll add that to our list of abilities. It'll have a cooldown of 1, which is 1 round, so you'll be able to use it every round. It's supposed to be capital, okay. And it's going to have a cost of 2. We're going to assume that's MP, and if it's 0, we're going to assume it's not a spell, because there aren't going to be any free spells. And there we go. So that'll add that heal ability onto the list. And another thing we can do, I'm just going to prep, we are going to fill out the rest of these levels real quick. But before that, I'm going to go to the main here. And we just want to say, we're just going to list the abilities. So I'm going to make another line here. And, well, since there could be quite a few of them, we probably actually want to start a new thing here. But let's put it at the bottom. We're just going to do a for loop, and it's going to be called, well, let's see, we want to get all the abilities. Well, let's change this to Cleric. We haven't built our wizard yet in this new form. And we just want to basically have a little test here to make sure they're actually gaining the abilities. So we'll say for, let's see, P1, or we'll just call it PC. We'll use some auto since we are using a modern version of C++. We can do this PC and wait a second, I need to do this differently. For auto ability by reference. We don't necessarily want to do it by reference, but if you don't do it by reference, it's going to make copies every time it goes through this loop. But by reference, you could modify them, which we don't actually want to modify them. So let's not do that right now. P1 dot. We're looking for abilities. How did I spell that? Let's take a look here. Make sure, yeah, there it is. Player character has no member abilities. Okay, right. So we got to think about this. It's actually going to be .pc. Well, this is a player character, not a player character delegate. So we got to go off of whatever's at this very bottom final instantiation here, which you see we have PC class. So we could have we probably want a function that actually does this. Now for just displaying it for testing purposes, it's going to be a little awkward because it's not something we necessarily want to do in the long run. So we have to kind of decide on how are we going to test this. So let me think here for a second. Okay, so one thing we could do is we could just expose it entirely and say, okay, let's make this return a vector of abilities, a vector of ability. Even by reference, we'll get a copy for now. And it's going to be kind of slow, but this is really just for testing purposes. So essentially we're just exposing it, and don't worry, I know this player character is a little redundant. Someone left a comment about that because it kind of just does what everything does already. But eventually what's going to happen, and I'll just say this real quick, is we're going to have stuff like equipment, and we'll have multiple of these, like head slot, for example, or weapon slot, and so on. Weapon slot. And we might also have like buffs in here and stuff. And what we'll be able to do is just like when you go to, I don't know, get all your stats and stuff, you'll be able to add these all together. So it'll be more like return this plus head slot dot strength or whatever it adds, or dot armor. And I guess this will be more relevant for armor on that kind of stuff. But we'll also have to do null checks on these and to make sure something's equipped. And we're going to assume like if it's null, nothing's equipped in that slot. You know, there's all this extra functionality we're going to be able to add to this. And that's really going to be the point of this whole thing, is to just tie all the aspects of the character together. While this one up here is more about just like the base types that every character has. And we'll kind of go from there. And we'll decide how to do that later. Got to make some design decisions, because like we could put equipment as part of this delegate, but also, you know, that stuff's going to be in your bag slots too and stuff like that, in which case we don't want it to really do anything with the player character. We probably have a whole separate area to handle that. And yeah, so that's kind of where this is eventually going. Anyway, let's get back to this ability. We'll just say get ability list, and it's just going to return PC class abilities. That's simple. Since it's designed in this way, it is going to make a copy of it, and that's our intention here, because we don't want whoever is getting it to modify. So that's one of the points of always returning copies in our case. These are small enough variables that it's not going to really hurt anything. But yeah, we wouldn't want people to be able to get them and then return or and then modify them, because they would just be able to hack everything. All right, so we want to get the ability first. So we'll go ability. All right, let's use auto. Abilities equals p1 dot get abilities, ability list. That's going to get us our copy, and then we can iterate through that. I spelled abilities wrong here too. Anyway, let's just do this. All abilities. God, I can't spell. All right, and then we can for this one we can go with reference because we already got a copy. We don't want to copy it yet again at this for loop, so we're going to use reference here. Let's call this a bill, or yeah, and we will go off all abilities here. Essentially just a for loop here that's going to go through all of them, and that should take care of it. Did I spell it wrong? I probably did. There we go. Abilities, I think that's spelled right. And all we want to do here is just do a cout on each of these. And maybe we could say something first, like it's above this for loop. We'll say abilities. Just a little formatting here. And we'll make a new line. And then for every one of these, we'll space it over a few, make a dash, and then say whatever the name is, build.name. And then a new line here. Let's make it a character. And that'll be it for now. That should just say all the abilities. We could, since we have access to it, we could say more about it, what it is, and stats and stuff. But let's just do name right now just to make sure it's working. Okay, so Cleric should all be built well enough to build this. We're gonna by default get this heal ability, have some MP. MP is gonna be a little tricky to work with because this won't necessarily know if they have MP or not. So that's actually a case for it to be a pointer, because we'll be able to see if it's instantiated or not. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So this point well star MP. Then on construct, let's say np equals new point well. So maybe this is what I was thinking with that unique pointer before. That'll just construct a brand new one, and then we can start doing this sort of stuff. Now the HP is one case because we always have it, but MP is another one because we don't necessarily always have it. So, you know, now that I'm thinking about this, we're probably going to want to check no matter what the class is, if it has it or not. So actually the MP might belong better in here, like so. And we might just go back to using unique pointers anyway, so we don't have to worry about the destructor and all that. Yeah, let's do it. I know we took it off there, but hey, now we see a point of doing this. So let's go back to using unique pointers. And I know I jump around a lot when I code. It's just the way I do it. So I know that annoys some people, but it's what gets the job done for me. I have to just work on where my brain is going sometimes. So hopefully that's not too frustrating for you guys to deal with. All right, HP equals standard make unique. So we'll construct this one automatically. And this is a point well. And we'll construct it with a 1. Now, notice that we're not going to construct the MP here. We're going to leave this one to the delegate to construct if they use it. So this way, we'll correct some other things here in a second. Let's go down a little bit. This way we can do a lot of different things. Well, we're going to have to change these back. But also, in these macros here, we're going to be able to do MP stuff as well. We're going to be able to have MP in here. And this will only work if the MP is not null. So we'll say if MP, just to make sure it actually exists, and then we'll set it. So that'll be a little bit of a difference there. We're going to need these new line eaters here. There we go. And we can do the same thing down here. And this will all make more sense in a second. If it doesn't, I'll just go if MP. And just make sure it's not null. Okay, let's do that. New line. This new line. This one. That one. Okay. Tap these over. Change them to MP. All right, so one thing we need to make sure we do is before we call this PC construct, if it has it, we need to put it right here, like so. And then now we can get rid of all of this stuff. We still want the abilities, it looks like, but we'll just put a comment here. Be sure to init, okay, before PC construct macro, which you know, it's kind of obvious if you look at the code, but just a little hint here. Now this is a unique pointer, so we can't just use new like that. We gotta go make unique of the type point well, and we can give it their base amount here. So let's go ahead and grab that, put it in there, and this one we want to get rid of, because that is now in the player character delegate. So there we go. So there's a potential of an MP pool there, but we're going to control some of it actually within where we start using the delegate. So pretty cool stuff there. And we no longer need these because that is also going to be automatic in the macro here, but only if it actually exists. So if it never gets constructed and set up, it'll just skip over those every time. So just a little hack we can do there. All right, and we're looking pretty good. Let's correct anything else we need to correct with the HP. I think anything that's HP dot needs to change back to HP dash. All right, there we go. And, you know, just to reiterate also, we're not trying to be perfect here. We're just trying to get some code experience in and learn some things and practice some things. So that's more of the intention rather than perfection or anything like that. We basically just want to work, do what we want, play around with some different options and stuff like that. All right, so we got that heal. This doesn't do anything yet, but let's just go to our main again. And, well, okay, before we go to our main, I guess we need to forward some MP functions like this get current, get max. So let's copy these lines down and just turn all the mention of HP into MP and make it work off that other well here. So MP, boom, boom, boom. This will stay the same. This one should be MP. And it's just going to call the get current and get max on those. We got to take damage and heal, but I think once we start using abilities, that's when we'll subtract from the MP pool. So we're not going to need functions here. We're going to have to figure out how they get used, but that won't really come into play until we start battling. For now, okay, now that we got those functions forwarded, let's go back to main. And let's just copy this HP line down and change it to MP. And just put this as MP Now there's something a little hacky here. So MP might be null. So we're gonna have to put like a case in here. So let's end that line. And let's just make MP its own little thing, because we're gonna need to see if it exists or not, basically. So it's gonna be a little different than how the HP works because of that. So we'll have to either yeah, I guess we just need to change this. So we need to make sure it exists, because if we try to return this and it doesn't exist, it's going to crash on us. So we're going to have to expand this function out a little bit. So let's make some new lines here and put a little logic in here and just say if PC class dot or p. So if it exists, we'll get the current. We'll just return the current. Otherwise, if it doesn't exist, we're just going to return zeros. So that'll be fine for now. And I guess we'll cast it. It'll auto cast to the well type. We'll just see if this all compiles before we start getting too fancy. And same thing here. Just do a check. Do they actually have the MP? If so, return the mount max. Else, just return zeros. That's fine. So there we go. That should take care of any potential bugs. And that also means that we can just leave this without doing any extra logic here. And they're just going to be zeros if we have it, no MP. All right, so now we should have that all added in. We got magic points, we got the potential of spells. Let's hit play and go ahead and just fix any errors we have here. Let's see what it's complaining about. Let's see here. It's complaining about a type cannot convert type to point well. Okay, let's go ahead and hit build again. And we want to go to the well, one of these should have more info. 1 second. All right, it's saying the constructor for one of our point wells was ambiguous. And I think that is because, let's see, let's look at our constructors here on the point well. We have one that takes nothing, and we have one that takes a current and max. And it must be something we did with the MP or with the HP here. So let's just go all the way up to our delegate and just take a look here. Let's see, we got HP, that looks fine. Okay, so we're only putting in one thing here. It takes at least two, otherwise, yeah, it's not going to know. It needs a current and a max. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if we go down here to our MP, we have the same thing going on. We need both. Because basically, there was no constructor in here that only takes one, so it's like, what do you do it? And so if you get that ambiguous error on a constructor, it could be that. All right, so let's hit play. Looks pretty good. And here we have the new Cleric now with more stuff. So MP, oh wait, we got a setting to 14. That's an oops. We might need to fix, we probably have a variable named wrong, but everything looks like it's going good. Strength, intellect, agility is going up still. Armor resistor 0. We have abilities now. There's no level 2 ability being gained yet, but if we add something, we'll see that it'll show up on that list. So let's just fix any errors we had here. I'm guessing somewhere here we are just yeah, it's in these level up and construct. We still have base HP here. Obviously that needs to be base MP on the MP, because you know that makes a lot of sense. Base MP. Now this kind of brings up another thing, because with this base MP being in here, if we don't have this right here on some of the classes like the rogue and the warrior later, it's gonna be, what's the word for it? It's basically gonna throw an error, because it's gonna we're going to have some code in here that doesn't reference anything. It's not going to have any idea what that is. So basically, we're going to need to put this base MP in all the classes the way we currently have it designed, which is somewhat okay. We could just say if they don't have any, we'll just make it zeros, and that'll be fine enough. Because then it's not, it's not going to matter anyway. So we'll just assume that will be the design for now, just to keep it simple. All right, and let's just gain another ability. Sure, I have them worked out on paper, but it's not really super relevant to the C++ and design. Let's just make another one here called Smite. That sounds like a good ability, although I don't really want damage abilities on the Cleric. We'll just put one in here for demo's sake, and we'll call this one target enemy. Takes scales off int. We'll make it do 2 damage. So it's just going to be kind of like the opposite of heal on enemies. Yeah, that's fine. And then we'll get that at level 2. And let's just make sure it shows up. So let's hit play here. Take a look and see that at level 2, we now have heal and smite. And that's good. So you can see that now, based on what we've designed here, to make the wizard, you would essentially do the same thing. You take this, copy it down, name everything wizard. Oh, make sure we keep the cleric one isolated. Wizard. And change it to the wizard numbers here. 10, 1, 8, 1. So it's 10, 1, 8. Let's up the base agility to 2. And base MP, let's give the wizard a little more. Like, give him 14 base MP. There we go. And our abilities, we're going to be different. Let's put like Fireball or something. Or Firebolt, pretty classic ability. And let's make it do, it's cost less, but let's make it do significantly more damage than what the Cleric's one does. And target enemy on that. So let's just copy that up there. And we need a level 2 ability. We could say, let's see, we could just add another one. We'll maybe just put like Ice Bolt or something. And we'll make it do a very similar thing. Maybe make it cost a tiny bit more and do a tiny bit more damage. Like maybe 6. That's just for example here. And everything else looks fine on that. Really just going off example. That's not what I have on this paper. I need to probably rework it here, because on this list that I made custom, it does have some trigger type abilities. I got a little creative, and we're not ready to get that creative with how everything's set up currently. But this will give you a good example of how you can do this. So of course, to gain the next one, you would just put more stuff in this level up code. You could essentially put the whole level tree in here. And you could even put multiple things on a single level, like so. And if you're not gaining an ability at all, and you're just gaining a stat, you could put that gain stat code in here, as well. So maybe the rogue and warrior and stuff just gain HP or agility or stuff like that. But for example, we could say, okay, maybe the wizard also gets just a little bit of a bonus something on level 2. So we could say like just MP plus equals what, some other amount. We'll just give them a bonus 1. And it doesn't like this plus equals because we gotta, well, it's basically a pointer. So, okay, we need to do, we need to add to the current. So we need to do like a, yeah, it gets a little convoluted because of how we have it as a point well, but basically we would need to do this sort of thing, which is a 1. So yeah, we could do that. I mean, so the point is you can increase your other stats here. We could say add to intellect or something. So in this case, we're just going to add 1. Get whatever your max is, add 1 to it, and increase the current by 1 as well. So that there will just add 1 to your maximum pool, and then give you 1 in case you need to restore 1. So I feel like that's a good thing to do if you increase your max. Just also give a little bit of whatever you gained to your current pool. And of course we could do, let's just do one more thing in here. Let's just say we get a little bonus int at level 2. So that would just be going off the stat types. So we're just going to look at how we're doing all our stats. And we got an increased stats. But otherwise, let's see, it's on our stat block. Our stat block is on our player character delegate. And it's just publicly available, so we can just directly access that one. Yeah, it's just part of it. So let's just look at our stat block. Yeah, we would just call, well, it is private here. So the only way to actually do it is to call increase stats. And it just does a plus equals. So yeah, we could just call increase stats and that would take care of it. Increase stats. And you see it's all zeros by default. So strength 0, intellect, let's give them 1. Agility 0. I'm going off this name here. It's super small. I don't know if you guys will actually be able to see it. But yeah, just filling out these constructors. And the rest are zeros, so they're going to default to zeros. But the thing is, with these default values, you have to fill out all the ones in front until you get to it. So there we go. Since strength is the first one, we at least got to fill that out. Yeah, just default value logic. But that'll give us 1 intellect at level 2 and 1 more MP. Oops, almost did. Almost based it off the HP. That would have caused some glitches. So there we go. So now we should see at level 2 we'll have Ice Bolt, and our MP should go up by an additional 1 more than the actual scalar, and we should get a bonus intellect. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's see, we got the Cleric showing there. Let's just, it's underlined player characters undefined. We must have an error in our code somewhere. Doesn't look like it. I think we're actually good. It's just, who knows what Visual Studio's doing sometimes. It just likes to underline things. So let's change this to Wizard. Now it is possible that I rename something wrong. Cleric, no. Wizard. Yeah, looks fine. Who knows what Visual Studio's doing? It's got a mind of its own sometimes. So let's just hit play here. See if we get an error. Looks like we just missed a bracket. So it does seem to actually be correct in complaining. We just have to find where we missed this bracket. Is it in the level up code? I think it is. Yeah. Okay, because yeah, this if statement ends there, and then yeah, we need one to end the level up. Yeah, that's all it was. So it was correct. And there we go. There's a wizard, level 1, the level 2. Looks like the changes are reflected correctly. Intellect goes up by 4 naturally, and then we got that bonus 1 from our level up at level 2. And you can kind of see the point here, and you can extrapolate from here. I'm not going to put all the expanding of the other classes in this video, but I might push some of it for the warrior and rogue. But this should give you just like a base understanding of how to do some level ups from here and how to expand into MP and some of the other logic we're doing with pointers and how this MP is going to work. You know what? We'll do at least one more here on camera because I want to show one with the MP stay null. So let's go create the next one. Let's make the warrior. And we're just going to use this same code here. Change that. 1, 2. Oh, we don't want to change the wizard class. Looks like it skipped this one. Warrior. And I'm kind of thinking maybe we should put these specific classes in their own files again, because this is just becoming really large. But now we need to design one. So base MP, we'll just make that a 0 because it's got to be in there. Class names, fine, delegate. All right, let's not construct the MP at all. And now we want some abilities. Our abilities here are going to cost 0, but we're going to start having cooldowns. Let's just have like a, I don't know, call something power attack. Let's just call power attack enemy. How much damage does it do? Now here we could do like, well, 4 plus strength, but in reality we probably also want it to be based off your weapon too. So we're kind of skipping over that detail at the moment. And we're also not considering hit chances, but I do have a formula in mind that we'll come back to later for how attacks work and chances of hit, stuff like that. So they'll get that at level 1. You know what? Maybe the warrior doesn't get anything at level 1. Maybe they just get the power attack at level 2. So let's put it down here. And there we go. That should be good enough. Oh, we need to correct these. It was 18,522. Okay, so let's keep that in mind there. 18,522. I feel like it should be 6. Let's give him a little buff. Warrior looking a little weak. All right. Let's go back to our main. Just change this to warrior for a second. Hit play. Make sure it all works fine with that same code. You can see he has 0, 0 MP. So later in our game code, you know, if we eventually make a real interface, we can basically just check that, like, if they have 0 MP, or if MP is null, then just don't display anything there, or something like that. Or we could even say that that's a different type of resource bar, like rage or energy or something. So we can play around with that later is the point. But you'll see no abilities level 1, just as intended. Level 2 looks like we gained that power attack, and yeah, we are ready to like level up, and you know, from here we could do all kinds of sweet stuff, and we could start making like some game progress, and you could get that gratifying feeling of I leveled up, I got my new ability I can use. All that cool stuff is starting to come in, all through the power of C++. Hope you're enjoying the episode. I appreciate all your guys' support and you watching and all that. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.